What's up, everyone? Welcome to Sabrina Talks. I'm Sabrina if you're new. If you're not, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for joining me. Now, today on Sabrina Talks, we are going to be talking about Euphoria, and specifically, I want to get into the two special episodes that they released in December and in January. Now, if you haven't seen any episodes of Euphoria, or if you haven't seen this two special episodes, I suggest you click off this video. You can come back when you've seen it, but I'm going to be talking about what happens in these two episodes, and obviously they're just going to be spoilers from the first season. So, let's get into my thoughts. So the first special episode of Euphoria came out on December 6th of 2020, and I believe it was filmed during like the pandemic, so I knew it wasn't really going to have all of the cast. Plus, it's supposed to be a story that's really focused on Rue, so I knew it was mainly just going to be Rue and somebody else, or just Rue by herself. But as it turns out in the episode, it is Rue and Ali, and little glimpses of Jules in there, and then everybody else is just kind of like background characters. I was so excited to hear that this episode was just strictly going to be about Rue, because you know at the ending of last season, we kind of left on like a weird cliffhanger where we didn't know if she overdosed, if she died, if she was just having another trip. Like, we didn't know what was happening. So I was glad to see we might be able to see what happened to Rue and make sure she is good. I really love this episode. I think it just tells us so much. There's so much wonderful gems in this episode, and it's just magnificent. So the episode starts off with Rue and Jules in like an intimate moment. They're like cuddly and kissing and lovey-dovey. And then the scene transitions to Rue being in a bathroom, and then we eventually see that she's in a diner and meeting up with Ali. Throughout the episode, they just have some deep conversations. They eat some pancakes or waffles or whatever, and they just talk about so many things that I think Rue really needed to hear. Zendaya as Rue does a fantastic job, as she usually does, because hello, she is an Emmy Award winner. I really love the acting in this episode from her, because she just shows so much emotion on her face without really ever saying anything, and that's just fantastic, because a lot of the episode is really just up close and personal in their faces, so you really gotta show all kind of emotions without saying anything, and she does a fantastic job. But Coleman Domingo as Ali really takes the cake on this episode, because wow, not only did he drop so many gems and really give Rue the tough love that she needs, and really just gives her no BS, but his acting as well is just magnificent. I'm also so happy that we got some more backstory onto Ali's character, because we know, he was a drug addict. We know he's Rue's sponsor, but we never really knew too much about his life besides, he also did drugs. We got to know how long he's been clean and when he's relapsed. We got to know about his kids. We got to know more about the things he's done in his past, like beating on his wife. We get to learn so much of these things, and I think it's so important that we know these things, because if he's going to try to mentor Rue, he has to kind of give some insight into his life besides saying like, oh, I've been through something. So I'm glad they allowed for him to have his like own little moments on sharing his life and how drugs and addiction has affected him. Like I said before, Ali drops so many gems throughout this episode that just is so fantastic. But one of my favorite things that he was talking to her about is their conversation about religion and Rue's dad dying, and how she just needs to believe in something, whether it is God or a gods or something greater than herself.
You have to create a new God or gods or whatever you can, but it is imperative that you believe in something greater than yourself.
I really enjoyed that they had that conversation, because that's a valid thing people might believe when they lose somebody. Also, while he was making that point, he kind of talked about like performative activism that companies do, with like him talking about Nike and how everybody wants a revolution and everyone's kind of doing a revolution. I thoroughly enjoyed that, because one, it fits so well into the message he was trying to get across, but it also fits so well in the time period that we were in December, still technically now too. Like, after all of June happened and all of the companies were like, oh, Black Lives Matter and we care about you, and then, a couple of months down the road it was crickets and nobody's saying anything anymore. So I'm so happy that they put that in the script. I love that we got like confirmation of all of the things that we assumed Rue was like going through and feeling in this episode. Like she herself actually said it instead of us being like, oh well, you know, I'm sure she's sad about this, or I'm sure she doesn't like herself about this, and da 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 da. I'm glad that they actually had her say these things. Also, with this conversation, we kind of learned that Rue is not the best narrator because she's just kind of unreliable. You know, we're seeing things from her perspective, so we're not getting the full story. We think it's the full story because Rue's telling it to us, but it's not really the full story. The way this episode ends, I feel like we didn't really get any full closure on whether or not she's gonna try to get clean. We just kind of left it off as she explained all of her feelings. Ali said some things, and then the episode ended. So I like that they didn't explicitly tell us so that we can figure it out for season 2. But I'm curious to see if she's actually going to try to stay clean, or if she's still adamant about how she's not going to be here for longer. But speaking of her and Jules, I want to go on to Jules' episode, which aired on January 15th of 2021. This was part 2 of the special episodes, and I'm glad that they decided to put Jules last because we got to hear Rue's perspective, and now we're getting Jules' perspective, which is the first time we're getting a perspective that isn't from Rue herself. And I kind of hope they continue to do that with the second season. They don't have to do all episodes that are not in Rue's perspective, but I'd like at least one episode where it's not Rue telling us what happened. Now with this Jules episode, Rue's episode kind of hurt my heart and just, you know, made me feel some things. But Jules' episode, oh, my heart broke. I was just near tears. They really got me in my feelings with this episode. Plus, Hunter Schafer, wow. I mean, we all knew the cast of Euphoria had some great acting skills, but Hunter Schafer really showed out in this episode. I especially love the fact that Hunter was a co-writer on this episode, so her and Sam Levinson was the only people who wrote this episode, and she helped kind of craft what she wanted for this episode. And I just thoroughly enjoy it because she's trans, so like we don't need somebody else trying to write her having some, you know, intimate thoughts about her life. Like, no, we need somebody who is actually trans writing for a character who is trans. Allowing this episode to be told from Jules' perspective really gives us some insight into what's going on in her head and how she feels about Rue, because we always just kind of assume from what Rue tells us, but now we can actually see what she feels. In this episode, Jules is literally having a therapy session, which I'm so glad, because this whole cast honestly needs some therapy. Not, you know, the actual actors, but the characters in this show all need some therapy, so I'm glad somebody's going to therapy. But throughout this therapy sessions, we find out that Jules is thinking about maybe detransitioning. We find out that she actually does really love Rue, and she's never been kissed by a girl before. Find out that Jules' mom was a drug addict, and that really shook me to my core because her and Rue's relationship really makes sense to me now, and I could see so much like parallels between her relationship with her mom and kind of her relationship with Rue and how it's sort of similar. Like in the beginning of the episode, she says Rue was the only one who really saw her behind all of her layers and really loved her the way, you know, like a mom would love their baby. And then she goes on to say she's upset with Rue because she put all this weight on her sobriety on Jules, which is fair, but like her being angry at Rue and her being angry at her mom were basically because of the same reasons. And I really was just blown away because we never really talk about Jules' mom, but I always just thought she wasn't, you know, supportive of Jules' transitioning, but apparently it's because she was a drug addict. And it's like, well, now everything makes sense. No wonder why you was drawn to Rue. Like, and even though we find out that she really does actually love Rue, now I'm like, well, do you love Rue because she reminds you of what your mom was supposed to be like, or do you just actually love Rue for Rue herself? And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to dive into this dynamic in season 2. I think having the therapist there and talk to her and kind of call her out on some of her way of thinking was so great, because it was like a counter to Ali. Like Ali was like telling Rue how it is, but with the therapist, she was kind of more softer with it, which, you know, she is a licensed therapist. She should be a little bit softer instead of, you know, like Ali out here cursing out Rue. I think the writing in this episode is so fantastic because even though I am not a trans woman or I am not someone who questions my gender identity often, I was still able to empathize and relate to Jules, especially when she was talking about how she doesn't know if the way she dresses or her view of femininity is because, you know, of what she always thought femininity is in regards to how males want you to be, or if it's just how she imagines she should be. And I think that's something, you know, anybody really thinks about, of like whether or not are you doing something because you want to do it, or are you doing something because society has always kind of told you this is the way you should look or this is the way you should do something. The only real critique I have on this episode is the sex scenes that are kind of intermingled throughout the episode that feature Jules. I think they were a bit too long, and I think they were a little bit too intimate. I felt a little uncomfortable, not because of Jules, just because I'm supposed to be envisioning a 16 or 17-year-old touching up her body and stuff, and I'm like, I don't think I should be seeing that. Like, that was the only issue. That's not on Jules or Hunter or, you know, anybody really. It's like, I just don't feel like I should be seeing this. I have like a complicated relationship with seeing sex scenes in teen shows, because on shows like Riverdale and like Pretty Little Liars and like Gossip Girl, they'd have sex scenes just to show that teens have sex, which I don't think serves a purpose for anything, because we know teens have sex and you can do so much other ways to show teens having sex without getting real intimate on it. And I know this is HBO and Hunter's 18, so it's fine, but it's also like, what I will say about Euphoria is when there are sex scenes, they're usually related to something or they're serving a purpose to show something, as opposed to, like I said, with them other normal teen shows where they're just having sex to have sex because why not? These always have a purpose for it or a meaning behind it. I want to talk about these two episodes as a whole because they're very much linked together. I love that in both episodes, Rue and Jules kind of dream of the same future scenario of them being in an apartment together, being intimate, and Jules going off to school. But what I love more is the fact that in Rue's episode, it's more like a lovey dream. It's all great. Everything's fantastic. But in Jules' episode, it's more of a nightmare because she comes back home and Rue is potentially dead or passed out or whatever. She can't get to her. So I love that they flipped that scene on its head for Jules' episode. I also really appreciate the fact that in the ending of Jules' episode, we see that Rue comes to see her, and this is before she was going to see Ali. So technically, Jules' episode happens first, and then it goes into Rue's episode, but I like that they put Rue's episode first and then air Jules's so that we can go back and really see how her emotions would affect her talking to Ali in that moment. I think it was so smart to have these episodes be as like therapy sessions, because technically we weren't supposed to get these episodes. And I think that's so smart because, one, with these like makeshift therapy sessions, we get to know so much more about the characters and just so much more about their relationship. I also think these two episodes allow us to talk about other things in season 2 whenever that comes, because whatever space this took up in season 2 is now free, so we can get into more things or different things, and I'm excited about that. So speaking of season 2, I was thinking about what do these two episodes mean for season 2? Now, one, I'm hoping we get a nice, good, solid, in-depth conversation between Rue and Jules, because they thoroughly need it. I mean, them two got some miscommunication going on and they both need to talk about their feelings. Now, I don't think they should get back together or start a relationship, because I still think they need some time. I mean, Jules needs a few more therapy sessions. Rue needs to get her life together before they can really try to start anything. So hopefully we get some good meaty conversations in season 2. I'm also looking forward to see whether or not Rue is going to decide if she wants to be clean or if she just wants to continue doing drugs. I would also very much love some more snippets of Jules being in therapy. We don't have to have a whole, dedicated episode, but I'd like to see just little snippets of conversations, or maybe just her talking about like, in my therapy session today, we was talking about da-da-da-da. I'd like to see that. Hopefully they can follow through with that. Though I'm super happy we got to see Rue and Jules in this episode, I'm so excited to see all of the rest of the other characters in Euphoria, because I'd like to see what the heck is going on with them and how it's going to relate to Rue and all of that. I'm really hoping we get a Lexi episode in season 2, because I still need to know things about her. I got some theories and thoughts, and I'd like to see if they are actually true. I'd also like to see more with Fez, because I love Fez. He's one of my favorite characters. So I'd just like to make sure he's good and we get some more backstory on his life. So I have high hopes for season 2. I'm just excited to see what nonsense they're going to bring to us. So that about wraps up my video for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. Comment down below and let me know what your thoughts on these 2 special episodes are, and let me know some of your predictions for season 2, because I love hearing theories. Subscribe to my channel for more entertainment related content. Plus, I'll probably do more Euphoria related videos in the future. Plus, I also always do music related content on my channel. So stay tuned for that. Share this video with your friends who also love Euphoria so we can all talk about it. And once again, thank you so much for watching my video. As always, please remember to be safe, be smart, be kind, and I'll see y'all in my next video. Bye, guys.